I was at a Dodger game this week, and I love sporting events like that. And at every sporting event, there's always those people around you where they're really into the game in a way that you're not into the game. You know, like you are really excited that they're there, like not sitting next to you there, that's a little terrifying, but like 10 seats away there because they make the game just a little bit more exciting. And there was a guy, the Dodgers were just getting their butts kicked by the Cincinnati Reds. Go sports ball. I know many of you are very excited right now about this story. And the guy's like losing his mind every time the Dodgers make a mistake, right? Like sweating, throwing his hat on the ground, moving around, like yelling at people, cussing. And I'm just fascinated by this human being at this point, right? And then sometimes things will go well, and he's dancing, he's getting everyone involved in it. And you just realize in life that when you are on a stage like that as the Dodgers are, or anyone along those lines, that people have the luxury of having an opinion about you. And this guy is just seeing the Dodgers not from where they are, but from where he's at. And that's something that I learned as a young pastor years and years ago, is that people don't see you from where you are, they see you from where they are. When I was 23 years old, there were some people who were crazy enough to allow me to become a teaching pastor. Wild life decision, by the way. Still wonder what was going on there. It was a big church, so 5 times a weekend, I would teach in front of thousands of people. It was a great time. Sometimes I wonder, like, what in the world did I say? I am sure that I said it loud and confidently. I promise you I didn't say anything good, though, right? I was just talking. And it was a really interesting situation because there was a senior pastor who had been there for 30 years, and he took me under his wings, and he was kind of preparing me to take over. And so he did everything he could to make it safe for me. But I remember as a 23-year-old, I didn't even have a frontal lobe yet, by the way, that I was so insecure that every single week I would put myself on this stage and I would give it everything that I had, and I was always wondering what other people thought about me. And then I remember that people would give you comments, and it's always just a select few, but you put yourself in front of enough people, there's going to be some people who have opinions about you. And I didn't know at the time, they're not seeing me from where I'm at, they're seeing me from where they're at. But you don't know that. You're just 23 years old, and you're just up there putting yourself out there on a stage and trying to be faithful and all this other language that you have at the time. But it was that hard lesson of continuing to put myself out there, continuing to be in positions of leadership, continuing to be on certain stages, and really working through those insecurities that you begin to develop finally some wisdom. You finally begin to be a little bit more gracious with yourself and more compassionate with yourself. Because if not, you're going to kill yourself. You're going to kill yourself over trying to constantly prove yourself to these people. Prove yourself that you said the words right, that the theology was okay, that this thing mattered. Did you speak to the cultural event that week? Did you parse that Greek word in the right way? Right? This is like old school church that I was in. Like, did he talk about pre-tribulation or post-tribulation? Nobody cares, by the way. Like, this is the kind of stuff that you're stressing yourself out about, but really it was just an adventure in growing up. And it was an adventure of maturity, and I know that we've all been there in some way. That we've all been in these stages of life and development where you've spent so much time worrying about where other people are at. And what I love about Jesus is that Jesus constantly comes in and gives us different wisdom for how to live. Different wisdom for what it means to be transformed. We've been in the Gospel of Mark all year. We're going to be in the Gospel of Mark for seems like years to come at this current rate. And one of the things I constantly want to remind people when we're in the Gospel of Mark is that for so many of us, we were given a version of Jesus and a version of God's story that it was all about you getting to heaven one day. And what you'll notice in the Jesus stories is that Jesus will never once talk about you going to heaven. He just doesn't seem that interested in it. What Jesus is very interested in is your transformation. He's very, very interested in how you live your life now. He's very, very interested in you bringing heaven to earth now. There was a phrase that I would say all the time back in my old school church life, right? That we're so heavenly minded that we're no earthly good. And that Jesus wants us to be transformed in a way because Jesus wants our lives to thrive. Jesus' words are, I have come. This is what Jesus says about why he came. He doesn't say, I have come that you may go to heaven one day. I have come that you may not endure the pits of hell for being a depraved human being. No. He says, I have come that you may have life and life to the fullest. That Jesus is deeply interested in our healing and our transformation and in our maturity. And how Jesus gets us there is Jesus gets us there through wisdom. And so we're in the part of the Gospel of Mark now where Jesus will give us wisdom through parables, through stories, Because it's stories and it's parables, just like in the world today, that you sit with a movie or a piece of art or music, and it wrestles with your soul. It moves you in a different way. It's not meant to be black and white. It's meant for you to interpret it from where you're at this stage of life. I think when I see Jesus more and more now, when I was younger, I would hear Jesus in these stories and parables, and I would think that Jesus was judging me. I would think that these were harsh words. And the more that I sit with Jesus, I realize, no, Jesus is compassionate towards me and gracious towards me. That Jesus has wisdom in these stories that just speak to me at every stage of life. I saw Jesus as judgmental before because that's where I was at in my life. I was insecure. I was in pain. I really was judging everybody else because I didn't know who I was. But that's not how God saw me. And so as we think about wisdom today, we're going to talk about some things. We're going to talk about grace and compassion. And if we can talk about grace and compassion, then we can talk about what it means to clean up. If we can talk about what it means to clean up, then we're going to talk about some shadow work. If we can talk about some shadow work, then we're going to talk about what it means to grow up. And if we can talk about what it means to grow up, then redwoods, my friends. And if we can talk about the redwoods, then we'll talk about waking up. And if we can talk about what it means to wake up, then we're going to go to a great 1990s movie, The Matrix. Red pill or blue pill. And if we can talk about The Matrix, then we'll talk about showing up. And if we can do that, then I'll talk about the LA City Attorney, Heidi Feldstein Soto. And we're going to do all that in like 22 minutes. So let's have a good time. Follow along with me in Mark chapter 4. Again, Jesus began to teach by the lake, and the crowd that gathered around him was so large that he got into a boat, and he sat in it out on the lake while all the people were along the shores at the water's edge. Again, everywhere Jesus goes, crowds show up. I remind you again and again that crowds always show up because everything that Jesus was doing is he was constantly healing people, and he was telling people good news about this kingdom of God. So when Jesus constantly heals people and he tells them good news, crowds show up because Jesus always leaves people better than he finds them. I say that again and again and again until it changes the DNA of who you are and how you understand God. God did not come to judge you in that way. God is not angry with you. God is not playing games with you. Jesus just wants to leave you better than he finds you. That's the story. That's good news. Jesus just wants to transform and heal you, because when you're healed and transformed, then you no longer hurt people, because hurt people, and then you become transformed, and healed people, heal people, and transform people, transform people. That's the good news, people. It's pretty simple. It's not a game of an angry God sending his son to be killed so that he could be happy with you. That's a crazy, weird, wild story that was invented about 500 years ago and doesn't even represent 2,000 years of Orthodox Christianity. That was just a little side note, by the way. I hope you enjoy that one. And a real coffee rush. He taught them many things by the parables, and in his teaching said, "Listen, a farmer went out to sow a seed, and as he was scattering the seed, some fell along the path, and the birds came up and ate it. Some fell on rocky places where it did not have much soil. It sprang up quickly because the soil was shallow. But when the sun came up, the plants were scorched, and they withered because they had no root. Other seed fell among the thorns, which grew up and choked the plants so that they did not bear grain. Still other seed fell on good soil. It came up, grew, and produced a crop, some multiplying 30, some 60, some 100 times. Then Jesus said, 'Whoever has ears to hear, let them hear.'" That's just a wisdom saying, by the way. That's a wisdom saying of, you ever just get like parables or stories or quotes from someone when you're younger and they don't mean anything, and then 20 years later you think about it and you're like, oh, that's what they were saying. Don Sweetnam was like this 70-year-old man. And when I was that 23-year-old preacher, he would come to me and he would say, "Cory, you're a great communicator, and I love how passionate you are about everything. And one day you'll have something to say." What the fuck, Don? I remember thinking to myself, what an asshole. And now I'm like, God, Don was so spot on. I just didn't have ears to hear it yet. I didn't know. I could talk with good articulation, but wisdom is hard fought, my friends. Wisdom comes with suffering and pain and figuring it out and growth. Wisdom just doesn't come because of margaritas in Bali, although I wish it did. Jesus goes on. When he was alone, the 12 and the others around him asked him about the parables. Again, remember in the stories of Jesus, Jesus heals everybody. You don't ever see like Jesus excluding people. He has harsh words definitely to say to the rich and religious people. Generally, he has harsh words to say to those people because those are people that don't always need God because they have other things to figure it out. But the rest of the people, he just heals all the time. Whether they follow him, don't follow him, he's never trying to convert a single human being. Jesus just heals them. But then there's some he invites a little bit deeper. He's like, oh, you want to know about this life? You want to enter into this wisdom? You want to follow me? You want to be a part of this path? Yeah, let's get deeper into this journey and story. And it's always the invitation for all of us. But that's your choice if you want to go deeper in this Jesus wisdom story. And so Jesus explains it to them. The secret of the kingdom of God has been given to you. But to those on the outside, everything is said in parables, so that they may ever be seeing, but never perceiving, and ever hearing, but never understanding. Otherwise, they might turn and be forgiven. That comes from a famous passage in Isaiah chapter 6, where Isaiah is called and commissioned into ministry. It's the famous verse where, in the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord high and lifted up, and the train of his robe filled the temple with glory, and there was seraphim everywhere speaking the name of God, and with 2 wings they covered their eyes, and 2 wings they covered their feet, with 2 wings they flew, and they cried, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty, who was and is to come. It's this commission to Israel about who they can be in the midst of figuring it out in that stage of life. So this is what Jesus is doing. He's inviting us into a deeper wisdom. He's commissioning his disciples in a passage that they would understand. And then Jesus said to them, don't you understand this parable? They clearly don't. How then will you understand any parable? The farmer sows the word. Some people are like the seed along the path where the word is sown. As soon as they hear it, Satan comes and takes away the word that was sown in them. Others, like seed sown on rocky places, hear the word and at once receive it with joy. But since they have no root, they last only a short time. And when trouble or persecution comes because of the word, they quickly fall away. Still others, like seeds sown among the thorns, hear the word, but the worries of this life, the deceitfulness of wealth, and the desires for other things come in and choke the word, making it unfruitful. Others, like seeds sown on good soil, hear the word, accept it, and produce a crop, some 30, some 60, some 100 times what was sown. I want you to think about this passage as stages of life, that Jesus is inviting us into wisdom. The great thing about wisdom teachers throughout the ages is that sometimes science and life catches up to it in technology, but the wisdom has always just been good. Sometimes we confuse advancement and progress and knowledge as something that's good. We forget that wisdom's probably been there the entire time. And so Jesus is giving his disciples this idea of what wisdom looks like. It's not linear, by the way, wisdom. So it's not like, hey, you do this, you do this, you do this, and then you do this. It's just that in stages of life, we move and we ebb and we flow. And whenever we're in stages of life, sometimes we tend to be in a certain area, but that doesn't mean that we're also not touching on other things. This is why tools like the Enneagram are so helpful, because they're 3-dimensional. It's not trying to just limit you to a certain thing that just says, you're only this number. But if you don't know what the Enneagram is, like, you can talk to TJ later. She's got a great class and resource for you, and we'll get you there. And it's this 3-dimensional tool that just gives you a better understanding of who you are in health, in unhealth, in normal times. There's been all of this work over the years, whether it's Myers-Briggs or it's Strength Finders, it's things like the Enneagram. We have modern psychology. We've got Maslow's hierarchy. We have things like spiral dynamics, talking about evolutionary consciousness. There's tools out there everywhere that are trying to give us language for our stages of life. That when we better understand our stages of life, we tend to be able to better navigate our stages of life. So one of the first stages that Jesus is talking about here, he's talking about the stage of life where we clean up. When Jesus says, it's like sowing the seed and then Satan comes along. The cleanup stage of life is pretty common around the world. It's always funny how in religious worlds, when we talk about cleanup, it's really always easy to blame things on the devil. Did you ever grow up in that world? It was always the devil's fault. And when it's always the devil's fault, there's never self-awareness and you never have to take any ownership, which is fascinating, by the way. And so in the cleanup world, it's just a normal part of being human. There are just some things that we need to clean up. Generally, we need to clean up things because we didn't learn appropriate skills to care for ourselves. You've heard me share this in here before, so we learn coping skills. And so when we are cleaning up in life, this is why we need things like 12-step programs. This is why you should go to therapy, because it teaches you to clean up. It teaches you appropriate skills to cope with your life in healthy ways. And along the journey of wisdom and transformation, you'll eventually be able to care for yourself in appropriate ways as well. Cleaning up is difficult, by the way. But when we're cleaning up, a lot of times what's going on is that we're navigating the world very functionally out there, but in here, this is all that we're thinking about. For my addict friends in the room, you know the story that I'm saying. Maybe you can handle the job, you can be in the relationship, but somewhere in here, this is the compass that's shaping who you are. And we clean up so that we can say, this doesn't have to be the compass that shapes who I am. There's more to who I am in this world. Also, you begin to free yourself. I'm not evil because I've wanted these things or I've done these things. I've just done these things because I didn't know how to care for myself. And we offer ourselves compassion and care. So I think in a story like this, Jesus uses the Satan language because that's what we just do. We want to blame it on something else. And I think what Jesus invites us into is that long process where we eventually get to take ownership and where we get to have self-awareness for ourselves, where we get to come to realization of who we are so that what is sown in us, what is put in us, the good that's in us can eventually grow and it can flourish in different ways. Now, if you're in a stage of life right now where you're cleaning up, which is totally okay, by the way, never judge yourself for that. And that cleanup sometimes comes at so many different ages in life. It's a good time to find therapy. It's a good time to have other people explore that journey with you, to see what you can't see. It's a great time maybe for you to find a 12-step group or a support group of some kind so that others can surround you and support you in this narrative. And the reason I say things like 12-step groups or therapy and not just Joe at the bar is that you need wisdom in this time. You don't need the blind leading the blind. You need other people who are trained to see what you cannot see so that you have actual tools to grow from where you're at. Maybe you're in the season of cleanup, but maybe you're also in the season of grow up. Jesus shares this story of it's like people who have joy, but eventually what happens is the sun comes out, it scorches it because they never had roots. Many of us just need to grow up. That's a big theme at New Abbey over the last few years. We're this good, liberal community who's deconstructed. We've read some books. We have listened to at least 2.5 podcasts. We can quote half a Brene Brown quote. We know some shit, people. But we haven't grown up. And so you get moved every single time something happens in the world. You're on to the next march, on to the next thing. And those things are good, by the way. But you don't let roots develop. I have not let roots develop at times. And what Jesus is saying is you got to grow up as well. You can be excited and passionate about things, about the new things that you're learning. But if you don't spend some time doing the work of developing roots, you're not going to stand. I see this all the time currently in the next thing in the liberal world. I'm critiquing my own kind, so to speak. I spent years critiquing conservatives. So boring, by the way. Been there, done that. Now I'm like, I'm just going to critique my own. So welcome to this world. This is for you. We spent years, the last 20 years I think have been beautiful for the world. The world's going through a revolution and a reformation. Occupy Wall Street, the Me Too movement, all the conversations around Palestine right now, Black Lives Matter. And why I think that those things are all beautiful, because what we're speaking to is injustices that are in the world. We're speaking to the reality that it's not working for every single human being, and it should work for every single human being. And how often in each and every one of those movements do you start off and you're like, yeah, and then later on you're like, it's getting a little wild out here. And then how often 5 years later do you not hear anything about that movement again? And part of the reason for that is what I'm sad about is in each of those movements, there's really good and important things that need to be said. There are things that are right in the world, but we don't allow roots to develop. It's a lot of passionate people who don't always take the time to take that next step about how are we going to actually implement this thing in the world. And that's what I care about for us, New Abbey. I care that you're healthy, and I care that you grow up so that whatever the thing is that you're passionate about, 10 years from now, that thing is still thriving. That for the other people who need your help, that you're able to offer something to them because you had some roots developed and now you have some fruit to bear in their lives as well. If we just go from the thing to the thing to the thing to the thing, what we're going to be is just passionate and angry, passionate and angry, passionate and angry, passionate and angry. But we might not have really solved the things that we set out to solve. And so I think Jesus is just telling us there's just stages of life where you got to grow up. There's stages of life where you can talk all you want about getting a six-pack, but if you do not do a sit-up, You're just not going to get a six-pack. That's just the way that these things work. It's hard out there to get some of the results that we want. And I know that. I've been at that place in New Abbey for a lot of times. I had seasons of showing up to police commission meetings in Black Lives Matter, even years before that. I had seasons of showing up to chapter meetings. I had seasons of showing up to all these different events. And I know, and this is like, I'm not trying to be judgy on it, it's just a lot easier to post a black square. It's just a lot easier. It's hard every Tuesday to be at the police commission meeting. It's hard to get people rallied up to build roots there, that if you really want to see change, you can post all you want on the internet, but the change is going to happen when you sit at every single police commission movie, when you know who every single city council member is, when you know where the budget comes from, when you know who votes on it, and you know that you have enough citizens to change the things that you want to change in the world. Real change is hard. Jesus knows that. So that's why he says, yeah, you're going to go out there with joy and you're going to be all passionate. The sun's going to come up and it might scorch it one day. So this is not a critique on you. This is just saying, if you want to see that change last, start building some roots. Make a game plan. This is one of those of maybe what you need now is a coach. You need someone to help map it out with you. What you need is somebody who's a little bit further on in life, and they've done that thing. And they can tell you the wisdom of, here's how I made it. Here's the things that went wrong. Maybe it's finding a mentor. That if we're going to grow up, we're going to need other people along the way who've been there before us. Maybe the stage in life you're in is cleaning up. Maybe the stage of life you're in is growing up. But maybe the stage of life you're in is waking up. I almost forgot the redwoods. I love the redwoods, by the way. I'll go back one second. I love that Jesus is always using analogies from nature. Things that an agrarian system and society would have understood much more. But we know it to be true as well. This is why I love anything with the physical body, because we know it to be true. Sometimes when we get into the spiritual, we get into the conceptual. But when you talk about the physical, you just know it. You experience it in your body in a different way, and it's just true. It's why I always use workout analogies, because it's something that we would all choose health, but we know how difficult it is to actually show up to the CrossFit gym 3 times a week. It's way tougher than a concept. Imagine that's what working out was. It was just concepts. You just got to think about it, and then you were good to go. That'd be freaking awesome. That's just not the way that it works. You got to show up, right? You got to be a part of the thing to grow up. What I love about the analogy about the redwoods is these redwoods are 300 feet tall, and the roots only go 10 feet deep, but the roots go 80 feet wide. And it's just this long journey that in growing up, it's about being gracious and compassionate to yourself, that to get roots 80 feet wide, it just doesn't happen in a year. Probably doesn't happen in 5 years. It's going to take decades and decades. So choose wisely how you want to grow up. Choose wisely where you're going to invest in things. I get that we're all passionate about some stuff. Continue to be passionate about it. And then slowly and surely every day, water it. Add good soil. Put some fertilizer on it. And I believe 10 years from now, you'll see incredible difference because you're able to stand the test of time in all of these things. And I think that you will really have seen a difference in the things that you're doing in the world. So some of us, we're in stages of life of cleaning up. Sometimes we're in stages of life of growing up. And sometimes a stage of life is just waking up. Jesus is talking about this story of waking up, and he says these like 3 things that are just true 2,000 years ago as they are today. It's just human universal wisdom. That we all want to wake up, and what waking up means is we all want union with God. No one in this room is like, you know what I want? Less union. Less union with God. Yes, less union with myself. Less union with other human beings. Jesus knows that we want these things, but like any of the other stages of life, Jesus is trying to give you wisdom that these things are a little bit hard fought. That it's going to require some effort in a different way. That we all want to wake up, and then Jesus just throws out the things that we all agree with. He's like, but sometimes when you want to wake up and you want union with God, you're just going to worry about some stuff. You're just going to. That's just the way that it works. Money, right? 2,000 years ago today, nothing's changed. It's like money. It's just going to get in the way. Money's going to get in the way about your union, A, because you just got so much of it, or man, you never have enough of it. And we all know what economic insecurity is like. Or some of you in this room know what it's like to have enough of it, and it's a thing that you're obsessed with. I just find it interesting that Jesus is always just blatant and direct about money in the world. Money's just a tool, by the way. It's just a tool so that we don't trade seashells anymore. That's all that it's for. But we've made it this other thing, and Jesus knows sometimes it just gets in the way. It's a distraction, even though it's real, because you can't pay your rent with hugs yet. I don't know if you know that. And so it's just real. And then Jesus talks about desires. And Jesus is not critiquing any of these things. He's just saying your worries, your anxiety, the paralysis by analysis, real things like money, your desires in this world are sometimes going to get in the way of you waking up. This is why I love people like Richard Rohr when they talk about the first half of life and the second half of life. Because it's so gracious when Richard Rohr talks about these things. When we're in the first half of life, guess what you want to do? You have worries and wants and desires, and you want to make some money, and you want to prove yourself in the world. We want to sell some scripts. Like, that's a good thing, right? Like, I want to be a baller. I wanted to be 23 and stand up in front of thousands of people. I wanted to write a book. I want people to acknowledge me. I couldn't wait till the Willow Creek Conference was calling me. You all have a version. That's funny, by the way, right? Everyone has a version of your thing that you want. It's okay that you want the Academy Award. I hope you get the Grammy. I hope you make more money than you know what to do with, and when you get that private jet, most importantly, please do not forget me. So whatever you're doing, that's okay. I think Jesus gets that. But what you need in life are people who've gone through that stage of life, who are now on the other side, who have some wisdom. And you know what they'll all say to you? I wish I spent more time with my kids. I wish I was at the baseball game. I wish every morning I sat down with my wife and we had a conversation than me rushing out the door to make the next dollar. I wish I loved myself more. No one at your funeral is going to talk about how many Academy Awards you made, earned, whatever it is, won. They're all going to say, man, that person showed up for me. The way they made me feel, how they cared for me. Those are the things that we talk about. That's second half of life stuff. And what you want in life are people who have wisdom, who've done it all, who've seen it. They're not judging you for it. They know you don't know. They're just letting you go. Giving you some space so that you can wake up as well. It's like the Matrix. Everyone remember the scene in the Matrix where he's sitting down and he's having the steak and he's already come out of the Matrix and he's like, to be honest, I want to go back in the Matrix because the steak tastes so good. I'd rather have the illusion than be out of the thing. And I think that's what Jesus is speaking to. I don't think it's a judgment or critique on it. I think it's just an acknowledgement of it. There's going to be a season of life, you'd rather have the steak even if it's the illusion. And Jesus is just trying to gently nudge you towards the things that are more meaningful and more beautiful and more good. And so as you wake up in the world, be gracious to yourself. Be compassionate with yourself. The things that you're trying to build, create, dominate, conquer, whatever, maybe you're just in the first half of life. But surround yourself with people who have wisdom. Surround yourself with people who have gone before you and that they can speak into where you're at in life so that you can wake up in a different way. This is why I love church so much. We need each other's collective wisdom here. We need one another's stories because it's crazy to think that I would have everything that I need on my own. It's true in the divine mystical sense, but there's also a reason why we're a body of humanity, that we just have different things to offer one another, and we need each other in that journey. Some of you are cleaning up. Some of us are growing up. Some of us are waking up. And I think the final stage is eventually we show up. In the world of showing up, this is where I think Jesus is saying some seed is going to plant itself, and then you're going to have folds and yields of 30, 60, 100 times more than what it was. I think when we show up, it takes a long time, by the way, to show up in really wild ways. I also think that we show up all throughout our life, even in the midst of all the other stages. I think you learn to show up. This isn't one of those things that you arrive one day. I'm always trying to move away from theology or spiritual disciplines that try to give you some illusion that you arrive. You are dying and resurrecting the whole time through the whole thing. That's the point of the story. You're going to know what you know now, and you didn't know it before because you didn't know it. You didn't die and resurrect through the thing. You didn't transform through it. That doesn't mean something's wrong with you. You just weren't there yet. That's totally okay. You're going to show up in your life right now, parents, the best you can for the kids. And of course, 20 years later, you're going to look back and you can say, man, I wish I had this wisdom. You didn't. Why didn't you do it? Because for 3 years in a row, you didn't sleep. Be compassionate to yourself. Some of you are in Hollywood right now, you're creatives, and you wish all these things are going to go your way. And 20 years from now, you're going to look back and you're like, what was that crap that I put out there? That's okay. You gave the best crap that you could to the world at that time. Everybody goes through that stage. There's nothing wrong with that. You just keep showing up in the best ways that you can. I think in the liberal world, I hear this a lot. You know what I want to show up for is myself. I agree with you. Show up for yourself. But I think in this last stage, it's you've gone full circle all the way again, and now you're able to show up for other people. If the last part of your journey is only still just showing up for yourself, I think we've really missed something there. It's about loving God, loving others as we love ourselves. I think many of us in Christianity, I say this a lot, particularly we gave this messaging to women quite a bit, love everybody else, be codependent, and you're not allowed to love yourself. That's bullshit. You got to learn to love yourself. You got to be an advocate for yourself, and we want other people to champion you. But you don't stop there. Now that you've been transformed, now that you've gone through a journey of cleaning up, you have the greatest story to show somebody else who's there now. And they need your story. And downright, it'd be selfish if you didn't share it with them. For all my brothers and sisters who are in sobriety or in 12-step rooms, you know the people that have shown up for you. You know because of their stories, of their strength, that they've been there for you. For all the parents in this room who just thought you were wildly crazy, and then you talk to a parent whose kids are out of the house, you're like, kids do that, and it's okay. You needed that. For all the people, again, I guess I'm using the Hollywood analogies this morning. That's your fault, so thank you for that. You need the stories of, oh, I really did write the script one day, and someone did pick it up, and they did sell it, and you need that. Don't ever hoard these things to yourself. Yes, learn to love yourself, but in the journey of showing up, you're eventually going to show up so that your light shines for the rest of the world because other people need you. That's how you have a crop that yields 30, 60, 100 times what Jesus is saying. So sometimes in our world of, go clean up. Go do that. Learn to cope. Figure out, do you do fight, flight, freeze, or fawn? How do you deal with trauma responses in this world? Go do some Enneagram. Do some therapy so that you can care yourself. Go grow up. You have to grow up. You can't just be passionate all the time, yelling at everybody on the internet and expecting there's going to be change. Because while you're yelling at everyone on the internet, there's somebody else out there lobbying with billions of dollars against the thing that you want. By the way, this is just real and practical. That if you want to see real change, then you got to go be a part of real change, and you better develop some roots because that's how change actually happens in the world. Maybe you're at a place where you need to wake up. Keep waking up. Keep searching for union with God. Know that there's going to be distractions all along the way. And in each of those stages of life and each of those journeys, know that you're going to do this for yourself. Yes, of course you are. You should. Because you can't give what you don't have. But once you have it, man, you better give it away. Give away what you have now. Give away the good that other people don't have. Your story, your experience, your beauty, your truth. That's what the world needs. I'm a part of another company. I'm an executive in this nonprofit that is 53 years old. And this nonprofit owns 13 for-profit companies. It's a $1 billion organization with 1,200 employees. And one of the things that makes us unique is that in all of our nonprofits, we pay the bills because we have these companies, and that's where our money goes to. And there's incredible partnership that we create. One of the things that we do in this partnership is that we scholarship 2,000 first-generation Latino students every single year. And because what we find is that the kid who was at Garfield High School or the kid who was at Azusa High School, maybe they're doing really well in school, and they go to USC or they go to NYU, and a lot of times there's pressures from their Latino community to start working right away because the family just needs it. And so what we do is we come along and we support them academically. We support them in school, which goes from a 10% retention rate to a 100% retention rate that they graduate. And one of the biggest ways that we do that is that we come around the family as well. And we let them understand what it's like to sow some seed and to build some roots. That if their kid can make it through college, it's going to change the generational wealth and the narrative of their family. And if they can be patient for just a little bit longer, if we can come in and if we can add a couple dollars, if we can provide a little bit of support, then it's going to change the trajectory, not just of this person, but how they're going to be able to show up for generations and generations and generations to come. And then what we do is that we partner with the largest companies in the world. Companies like Toyota and Boeing, all of the banks, you name it, and we create a Fortune 500 executive tract. So that when these students are done, we know that in the world right now that these companies are looking for diversity with their executives. So we want them to know that these kids have incredible stories. They've been passionate about what they're doing. They've gotten the help that they've needed. They've got some effort, right? We've helped pay them, and now they get to be in position so that they get to show up. And now they get to succeed, and now they're going to have a different place in the world so that they can go and that they can invest and that they can help people who are in the next generation coming up behind them. It's a long play, by the way. It's a 53-year-old story. On Friday night, we had our gala where we bring all of the people out, right? A bunch of muckety mucks, and we all get dressed up, and we invite 2,000 of our closest friends And it's really beautiful, and we get to hear the stories of the scholars. And every year I'm blown away. It's one of my favorite nights of the year. Because just a reminder, it's all the wisdom that Jesus is talking about here. It started with 4 scholars. It actually started with a story of, in the 1930s, there was a guy named Caesar who was a farm worker in the San Fernando Valley. And there was a bunch of Presbyterian pastors who saw Caesar one day and said, Caesar, you're a really smart guy. We want to send you to this small little school called USC. And so, that was a joke, not a good one, but thank you. So he goes to USC. And imagine in 1940, you graduate from USC as a Latino farm worker. That wasn't a common thing, by the way. And that family has set a legacy for the last 80-something years because one person's life was changed. Somebody sowed something in Caesar. And that's the same family who started the organization that I work for. And now there's hundreds of thousands of students around the world whose lives are changed. And they will now go impact and change the lives of other people around them. For me, what it is, it's this reminder that we can sow 30, 60, 100 times more than we could ever imagine. But we have to be committed to the journey. We have to be self-aware. We have to participate in wisdom. You don't go show up in that way if you don't clean up. You don't go show up in that way if you don't grow up. Because of course, along the way of a large organization like that, you learn a lot of different things. You don't do it perfectly all the time, but you grow. Of course, you have to wake up. And for me, it just was the reminder of that's what I hope for this place. Now, Abbey, it's wild to think that in 2024, in Los Angeles, there are not more progressive, inclusive, affirming churches. And it's not like we're doing something crazy out there. We're doing this wild thing. We're just like, every human being's made in the image of God. Ooh, I know, heretics, right? I just believe that what we're doing here, I believe so much in your cleaning up. I believe so much in our cleaning up. I believe so much in our growing up. I believe so much in our waking up. So that 50-some years from now, there's generation after generation after generation where this is not an anomaly. There are communities of faith for people who long to connect and be in union with God, who have a place to mature, a place to heal, a place to transform. And I think that we're creating that thing together. So wherever you find yourself, whatever stage of life, I don't know where we're at. You can't always see it in real time. But I trust that whatever God's doing, that in decades and decades to come, that we're going to see fruit 100-fold more than we can ever imagine. And I always know the stories of my own kids. I see it in my kids' lives. My kids' view of humanity and of God is so big and so robust because of each of you. When I was 7 years old, I was worried that I was going to hell. When I was 7 years old, I was terrified that I was going to be raptured. That is psychological trauma, by the way. My kids just live in a world where they just believe in the goodness of God. I told you guys a story the other week of an umpire on a baseball field who collapsed and was having a seizure. And to see my little 10-year-old gather all these kids, because my kid's not like a weird evangelical like I was a weirdo. It was just natural for him. This man needs healing and help right now. So he gathered all the other kids, not thinking about it in some weird way of God, but just said, should we all pray for Dan right now? It was pure. It was genuine. It was beautiful. It was an invitation for others to have union with God. And you all create that. Or the story that I've shared in here a million times, and I shared it last week, but I'll share it again. At Pride last year, when my kids hear the other church telling every single person out there that they are going to hell, that they are sin and an abomination, that my kid cries and says, Dad, why are they saying that God talks that way? That doesn't sound anything like God. You're right, it doesn't. That's not who God is. He doesn't know that because of all of doctrine and dogma or reading more Bible passages. He knows that because of the ways that you all have showed up in his life. Thank you, New Abbey, for whatever stage of life that you're in. Be gracious to yourself. Be compassionate with yourself. And trust that Jesus has you on this journey of wisdom. Would you find the same 3 or 4 people and answer the same question again? How would you describe your current stage in life? Enjoy.